Once a problem has been identified as something worth solving, it's time to start identifying requirements for the solution. Identifying requirements involves answering questions about what the product should or should not do. This is also sometimes called requirements gathering. But it's much more active than just gathering requirements. The best PMs will understand the context behind each requirement. This is another critical element of a PM's role. PMs write requirements in PRDs, which we'll talk more about later in a later concept. Identifying requirements can happen through a variety of channels. One method is through research. It's usually helpful to get started by doing some research, whether this is doing quick online research on your own to get a better understanding of the space, or looking at information that the team's already collected, or doing more exhaustive market and user research, which can take many different forms, like side-by-side product comparisons or longitudinal studies. Related to user research is user interviews, where you can talk directly with users to understand their needs. This is a super powerful way to hear firsthand the types of problems or challenges users are encountering. It can also really help to build empathy so that you're able to put yourself in the user's shoes. Another method is through stakeholder interviews. Interview people at your company to get a better understanding of the business objectives and requirements that might come from other stakeholders, like marketing or legal and privacy. You also can identify requirements through prototyping. By going through the process of building a prototype, it forces you to connect all the dots. You may realize that you're missing a screen or that there's a critical interaction missing that hadn't yet been accounted for. These are some of the most common methods to identify requirements, but keep in mind that this isn't an exhaustive list. There's lots more. I'm going to share a couple tips that will be helpful while you're identifying requirements. Keep in mind that when you're talking to people, they might not always be able to tell you what they need. Or just because someone says that they need something specific, it doesn't mean that that's the actual solution or requirement. The role of the PM is to push deeper and understand the motivations and needs that might not always be super apparent. For example, imagine after running some user research sessions for a budget managing app, you see that there's a trend of users saying that they wish the product allowed them to categorize each transaction. You could go ahead and build that and it would provide some value. But if you asked a few more questions, you'd realize that the user really wants to understand where money is coming from and how it's being spent. Instead of just adding a field that allows users to input this information, a better solution would be a feature that automatically categorizes each transaction for the user. Another tip is document everything. This includes both documenting requirements as well as the steps that you took to get to those requirements. It's super helpful to have detailed notes that you can refer back to later on from research or interviews that you did or meetings that you went to. Also, it's not just for you, it's for the rest of your team to refer to as well. One challenge that often comes up is that you can never be sure that you have all the requirements. Requirements will continue to grow and evolve over time as you learn more and get new information. When you're talking to people, you might not get all the information, or they might forget to mention something important. Or sometimes things change and priorities shift. Whatever it is, requirements will continue to grow and evolve over time as you learn more. This is okay. You can mitigate against this by factoring in and making sure that the team has some extra time to adjust changes in requirements in the schedule. Another thing that ties into changing requirements that I cannot stress enough is keep the PRD up to date. Things will inevitably change, and as things do change, make sure that you update the PRD and include a change log with what changed and when. That document is the source of truth for everybody. Anyone should be able to look at it at any time and understand exactly what the team is working on. Also, it's important to be transparent. Share out status updates and the requirements that you've captured, and new requirements when they come up, and any requirements that might have changed. It's super helpful to make sure that the team's aware of everything and on the same page. But this also makes sure that there's alignment behind everything that the team's doing, as well as making sure that your understanding and the team's understanding is the same. This will prevent many surprises from coming up in the future. These are just a few tips that you can keep in mind to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.